Linda Hansen has a question.
So as I'm looking at all of those people that work in licensing, what do all of them do? I mean, I know licensing is complex, but that is a lot more people than I thought.
Sure. So Kathy Webb is the ARL specialist. She is an education specialist, and so her day-to-day work has a lot to do with mentoring individual teachers who are working on their ARL and helping them set up plans for what they'll be doing. Jane Conway is, her position was really is funded by the legislature to oversee the TSSP program, the Teacher Salary Supplement, and she also does auditing to make sure that when people renew their licenses, they're being honest about that, so that we just do a sample on that. Kristen Campbell is our data analyst. Stephanie Crossland is one that we have just, this is part of the reorganization, so she is a tech, a program specialist in alternative routes, so she works particularly with alternative routes. Erica Horsley is Travis's support staff. She is his executive secretary. Bonnie Smith and Michelle Hernandez are our front counter, and they work with the public when they come in, and they also process licenses. Stephanie Ferris does our state-approved endorsement plans, which are when people already have a license and they're trying to add endorsements, so she works specifically with them. Penny Ford is support staff for alternative routes, and then our vacant one will support the ones that I wasn't specific about. We also do out of state, and we have different people concentrate on one. So we have all of the out of state, we have returning to licensure, we have I think it's Michelle that works with the universities, but I'm not sure. So all the new university people, we process a lot of licenses.
How many current teachers do we have in the state of Utah?
Oh, I wish I knew that off the top
like
of my head.
34,000.
Let me look at the fact sheet here.
Oh, your fingertip facts?
No, this is this one. Is it on here, do you think?
It might be.
I can tell you what the average of their salaries. Here we go.
Oh. It's not stepping on words.
Teachers. 28,000. Does that sound right? I can't. I mean,
It sounds a little low.
28,713.
That
Then
cannot be
education
right.
specialist.
That can't be a right number.
Yeah.
Oh, point
0.818. Well, yeah.
27,713.818.
Yeah, the kids in that
Classroom
.818 classroom.
But that's just.
But why would we put out a fact sheet that has .818 on it?
Because that's what the data is with the
Precise.
FTEs. I mean, it's a
You could
reasonable question.
You could have a third of an FTE or part of an FTE.
We
It's
can
a-
round the FTE up.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's a public fact sheet, I think that number, that's why I was trying to figure out, is that a comma or a decimal? Come to find out it's a decimal.
Well, the national average of kids is 2.5, so we have that in our national average of
Yeah,
children.
but we have a total FTEs of 35,116.871.
That would be the teachers.
That would be, yeah.
Some of our teachers are part-time or
Yep.
quarter-time, and so.
Okay, you guys don't have to justify this, all right? It's just, yeah, we shouldn't put a decimal point. It's a quick fact sheet, that's all it is.
Welcome, Spencer, to our meeting.
Yeah.
We're moving along, so.
I just think, I'm just trying to help you better, that's all.
Thank you. I would
I
like
agree.
to say that Jane Conway does a great job, and
Thank you.
I would like to see us be able to maybe have all of our, and I don't know what this would involve, but when you are relicensing, we all gather up, as a teacher, we all gather up our papers, and we all have all these papers. And we have a couple of places where we house those papers and those classes we take. Is there a way that maybe we can start scanning our papers when we get them and then putting them into a receptacle? So that would be more.
So two things about that. One is, yes, we are really trying to get more and more paperless all the time.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, we would like to do that. The other thing is the board is going to have an opportunity to look at relicensure and what that process is. And that will be a great time to talk about what kind of evidence will be necessary. And I think we can definitely look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So
Kathleen,
Yes, Joel?
Could I bounce a couple of questions off Diana?
Yes, you may.
All right. Diana, I have heard, and I don't know if this is correct or not, that to recall, the board passed alternative route to licensure in the end of 2016. And I have heard that not a single school district has adopted it.
That's not true. We had a report.
Yeah.
That's not true.
The board.
Okay.
the board had-
Right, that is not true. And it was just to clarify, it was the Academic Pathway to Teaching that was recently adopted. ARL is, oh goodness, over 10 years old. There are
Okay.
some school districts who have drug their heels on hiring APT teachers. That we don't do hiring. So we have the license. We have a number of teachers who are licensed that way, and a number of teachers licensed that way who are actually teaching.
Joel, the report was in the November Law and Licensing Committee. If you go back in board docs, there's an APT report there. And it looked like to us, when we looked at it, that every district had used it at least once and charged
really?
too. Yes. So go back and look at that report in the November Law and Licensing documentation. It's really an interesting report.
Thank you very much for pointing that out. Thank you. Diana, the second question is, I've heard sometimes that people will move here from out of state, like, you know, their spouse might get a job in Utah, and maybe they're living in, let's say Georgia. And they come to Utah, and they're interested in being a teacher, but that it's very difficult to become licensed in Utah. I mean, maybe they were 20 years, they were a teacher in Georgia, but it's so difficult they get discouraged and go into another profession or just don't work. How hard is it typically if you are a teacher licensed in another state and you come to Utah? And should we look at that and potentially make it easier?
So you already have looked at that. The rule that, I'm sorry, I still get confused with whether it was yesterday or next month, but the rule that governs out-of-state licensing has been rewritten. And so, for example, one of the things now is we recognize experience in other states in a way that is different than we did in the past. In the past, we made sure that they had comparable classwork and endorsements. That was our process. And I agree, it was very cumbersome for people that were coming from out of state. When we did our focus groups, we had a lot of feedback. I would say that was definitely in the top 5 of things that people wanted to have changed, and you'll see that change in the rewritten board rule. And we separated things in the board rule from what we can do now, and then what we can do, what we had to wait for the legislature, and what will take more time with Cactus, which is the associate, professional, and LEA specific. That part will have to wait, but the out-of-state changes we are ready to do right away. So I believe Travis is presenting those today in Law and Licensing. So you can see that new rule. Oh, sorry.
How long ago did that new rule take effect? Are we still waiting to have it take effect, or has it taken effect?
So Travis is presenting that today in Law and Licensing, and so that could take effect. You would be voting on it as a full board next month.
Excellent. Okay. And for most of the feedback, it's being well received. It's going well.
Yeah, in fact, so this never happens when I talk about policy, but when I went out to the principals associations, I did elementary and secondary both, and talked about the changes that were coming up. And when I talked about out of state, they actually applauded. And like I said, that never happens in the middle of a speech about policy. So they are very excited about this change.
Good. Good. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. That's all, Kathleen.
Thank you, Joel. As a teacher from out of state, I can tell you that my experience was quick, painless, and not a problem. So thank you for working on that, because we do have a lot of teachers coming here from out of state.
We do. And we want to attract them. That's part of the solution to the shortage problem, right? Come to Utah, teach in Utah, especially if you're good. We'd like that.
Especially if you're good.
Yeah. We manage 5 federal programs and grants. When you look at the budget details, it looks like there are more, because sometimes in the budget they get separated between what we keep in the office and what goes out to schools. The Title IIA federal grant is focused on professional learning for teachers and high-quality teachers. It pays for things like college coursework for people working on endorsements. Districts can use it to entice teachers. They can pay bonuses, hiring bonuses. They can pay for teachers to take tests that they need to take. One thing that you maybe have seen, that this Title IIA is not included in the president's budget, and so we are in danger of losing it. I believe it's about $14 million, something that goes out to the LEAs. It would be quite a loss to the LEAs. A new one is Title IVA. This was just established in ESSA, and it's student support and academic enrichment. This grant is currently out for review. So we chose to go a competitive route on this one because it's not very much money. And so right now we have the applications from the districts and charter schools, and those are being reviewed. We'll be bringing those to you when we finish that process. We have a Javits grant for serving underserved, gifted, and talented students. That grant ends this year. We have a highly qualified school readiness expansion grant and the AmeriCorps Read Graduate and Succeed grant. Those two grants, we work with TANF funding is a part of those, and we also work with other government agencies on those. And then I'm not going to go through all of these individually, but I'm happy to answer any questions. All of these programs are programs that at one time were established by the legislature. Some of them have funding that helps support the people that you see listed there. Some of them do not. They're just things that we assign to people to take care of. And by the way, this is half of them, so if you don't have any questions, I'll have Deborah go to the other half.
Can I ask a question about, is there a place where you can find the funding associated with them and which ones are funded and which ones are not funded?
You mean in terms of what? So they're all funded, but they don't all have administrative portions that fund the work that comes out of this office. So, for example, USTAR is grants that go to school, that go to districts for expansion of contracts for teachers to work in the summer or after school and that kind of thing. We do not get any administrative funding for that, but the program itself is $6.2 million. So most of these work like that, that the program has funding from the legislature, and then the work that is done is done by the specialists in our office. And I do have another slide that shows you which ones we have administrative funding for.
Thank you.
Which is this one. So we do get state funding that supports the work of this office. So we actually get a pretty large chunk that just supports the salaries and just the general work that we do, and that's our Teaching and Learning Administration Fund. We get specific administration funding for the programs that you see listed there, and so the specialists that work in those areas are funded by those programs. Should we ever lose those programs, we would also lose those specialists because we don't have state funding that supports them by themselves. So there's that. And then we have the licensing, so that we get a large amount of money for licensing, and that supports all of the licensing staff. They don't receive any of the general state funding. And then I put UPAC on the list because it's in my budget, but really it's Ben that just takes care of all of that. So that's not really part of the section, but the funding comes to our section, and then we take it off from there. Then I just wanted to let you know that we have a couple of other grants too. These tend to come and go. Artworks for Kids works with the arts, obviously. Hattie Monk supports resources for libraries. The Network for Transforming Educator Preparation is the grant that we got a couple years ago that supported a lot of the licensing work that we've been doing. iSchools is technology. I think that one's getting close to being over. National Geographic is a small one. BTS is a huge one. The Sorensen Legacy grant supports the banquet that they do for the arts. And then we have a grant that helps us with Teacher of the Year. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Diane. No. Any questions?
For me,
Awesome. Would you like to move on to the next section?
Pull up the budget summary, Deborah, please. So each month as well, with the section reviews, they'll go through the PowerPoint presentation as Diana did, and then for the benefit of the Finance Committee members, we focus in on one specific section's budget, alert you to any issues or concerns we may have with them. I don't necessarily have one with teaching and learning, and nor do my staff, I believe. But it also offers you an opportunity to, you know, at your, you can drill down on any one of the categories on the programs and see where the money's going into the funding for each program. Because if you go back up to the top, Deborah, you can see the sources of the revenue that they have, and then the budget categories, I believe. So, or is this just the summary of the categories? Yeah. It's just the categories, the budget categories. But then if you could scroll down, like I said, you can start to get into each one of the different categories, programs, all the way through. So,
Kathleen, may I? So I just lauded my staff and how great all the work they did, but I want to make sure that you understand too that all of that is supported by the work of finance.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they're separate, none of that work could happen without the work that these guys do, and Jim, who's not at the table, also supports us. This is an incredibly complex budget, and quite frankly, I don't know how Deborah does it for this one and every other one, and I don't know how Diane does it just for this one. And so I just want to make sure that they're recognized too for all the work they do.
One of the changes that we did make was adding an additional capacity. In the past, there was one section accountant, and so now we have Diane and Jim both on this particular budget because it is so complex and it is so large. It's one of your, if not the biggest budgets in your enterprise here. So.
Thank you to everybody who has worked so hard to make this transparent and clear. This is fantastic. Any questions?
Yeah, subject to-
Okay. We move on to 1.3.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
And I'm glad you held off on complimenting the finance team until after they said that they had no problem.
This isn't my first rodeo.
Yeah.
Last
Lorraine
one.
here. So David, this is the board member salary of chair, if you invite David Thomas up.
Dave Thomas, can you please come to the front of the room?
And I don't see Lorraine, so Lorraine was supposed to be here too. She texted me.
Thank you, David.
One who really should be here is Lauren. She's done the lion's share of the work.
Yeah, we're gonna try to locate her.
So we are on board policy and board member salary. I would like to say that I appreciate the time and energy you put into this. As I have expressed in the past, that I would frequently go to things and I would not know whether I was being compensated or not, so now I'm
Okay,
glad I
now
am.
we have the,
Thank you, Lorraine, for taking time out of your busy schedule and coming down. You're probably required in lots of rooms.
Okay, we're up.
Am I talking or are you talking?
you're talking.
Oh, okay.
I'll pull it up here in just a second.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Start, subject to the chair's direction.
All right, as you'll recall, last time you directed us to put in the policy the categories of the types of meetings that board members are assigned, or the types of committees. And so if you'll go to item 4C, we have a table that's down below that shows all the types of meetings, the types of committees. The compensation category is what's current right now, so you can change that any way you want. So this is before you to determine how you want to change that, or if you do. And if you want me to explain why I believe you were compensated or not to begin with, I can do that. That's been at the discretion of the chair currently. So I don't know, do you want me to run through these?
But that's been the biggest change that we've made,
Yeah.
is that we went back to the statute And rather than being discretionary with the chair, it is a matter for the board to decide. So these matters, these categories and individual matters as to whether or not they are going to be compensated is a matter for board consideration. So we've taken that, taken that one change and made sure that we have within our policy that it is a board decision rather than just the chair.
The only question that I have is the board advisory committee required by resolution or rule, including one or more board members. If it's required by rule or statute for one of us to be there, I think compensation should be considered.
That's certainly within the prerogative of the board. And again, you know, the why and how those have come about, there has been an evolutionary stance, and Lorraine can certainly go back through that as to why certain ones were not, and even though they were specifically required attendance based on assignments.
Thank you, Spencer.
So, legislatively, if they show up to an interim committee or they go to any function, the legislature, I think they're reimbursed or compensated on the per day basis. The legislature.
Oh, the legislature. Okay, I was thinking you're needing board members who go
Right.
to.
So,
Okay.
tell me how, because I feel like, contrary to Kathleen trying to stifle my voice in this, I feel like I can ask these questions because I've not been compensated for anything I've done here in 3.5 years. So I'm going to stick up for those that have. I have the ability to not be compensated, so it's not neither here nor there, but everybody else here puts in lots and lots of time. So how do we do it on a per day basis, or?
Let me explain that. And that's in your policy. That's under 2, section 2. And these are your regular scheduled meetings. They're all automatically, and your committee meetings. Now I'll get to the others.
Okay.
Okay, so
I
those
wanted to
regular
know the
meetings are
dollar
automatically compensated, $273 a meeting.
Okay.
And that's by statute.
Okay.
Okay, that's set by statute.
Right.
So that's what everybody gets for your board meetings, for your committee
And-
meetings.
and that's
They're-
per-
There's regularly scheduled.
That's per day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
The full day.
So in other words,
Right.
if you attend 2 meetings, you don't double up. It's just, you just
Right.
get the daily
Okay.
per diem. Yep.
Right. And so what we're looking at today are those extra meetings where you're assigned a task force, where you're assigned, by statute, board members are assigned, board members have to be on certain things by statute. The ones that are generally in statute, it says right in the statute that they can't be compensated, that no compensation. So we need to divide the ones that are statute are different than the ones that are by board rule or by board resolution. Okay, those are 2 different categories.
So how many of those exist by statute?
If you look at your other list, there's 2 things in board docs. The one is the policy, the other is this, the other sheet which lays out all the committees specifically, and those are designated. So if you go to the external committee assignments, it tells you the first probably
But I'm wanting
3
to
or
know,
4.
I'm wanting to know what ones are expressly prohibited from being paid for by statute.
Right, it's on this
It's
list.
in that
Okay,
list.
So the
External.
Commission on Civic and Character Education,
So,
Is
So
prohibited.
But it's not mentioned in statute, it just says external committees, right? And statute just says external committees, it doesn't list them out. You've just listed them on there because they're external committees.
if you go to the statute itself, it will say that.
It says external committees though, it doesn't say Commission on Character Education, it doesn't list those specific ones, it just says external committees cannot be
The
compensated.
specific statute on the commission will say that. The specific statute on the Board of Trustees nominating committee says in the statute that members of that committee cannot be. So if you go to the specific statute on that,
okay, so
It will say that.
any of these that have the statute referenced cannot be compensated. Is that
right.
correct?
Most of them, for instance, the Utah Underage Drinking Prevention Program Advisory Committee does not expressly say that in statute. But generally, we followed suit with the others that say that in statute.
Did you have another
A
question?
comment, I just have a comment. I
Thank you.
believe, especially since they say specifically external committees cannot be, that they expected internal committees to be. And so I would like to have the policy that if the board is the underlying policy is if the board has appointed someone to be on a committee, and it is a USBE committee, then we get compensated for it.
That's,
So that's up to us. I
That's
guess,
up to you.
right?
So whether it's an advisory committee or an ad hoc committee, or whether everybody's on the committee, or if they're just a couple of board members on the committee, I think the underlying thing should be is if the board has asked us to be on the committee and it's a USB committee, then we should be compensated. And that's just, to
now,
me, it's simple and,
but there are some, you know, there are some countervailing positions as to why it's ended up the way it has. I think that most people would agree that if it's an assigned committee, you ought to be getting compensated for it. But there are those committees where compensation for that committee is, there are other people who are part of that committee that are not being compensated, and so it creates that disparity. And that's something that why they haven't been receiving compensation. But whether they do or not, whether it's continued or not, that's really up to you.
Thank you, Spencer.
So I'm looking at the statute on 67, the very first one, Commission on Civic and Character Education. And it says in here, a member who is not a legislator, so I love that legislators will be paid for this, okay? A member who is not a legislator may not receive compensation or benefits for the member's service, but may receive a per diem for travel expenses allowed. Now, it's my belief, this is how I believe it should function, and whether it needs a code change. Everybody else who's on here is a non-elected person, okay? So it's stating a member who is a legislator may receive his regular rate, but the lieutenant governor as chief election officer of the state or a designee, I get that, it's coming out of state funds. One member of the Senate appointed by the, excuse me, here, let me get down to, one member of the State Board of Regents appointed by the chair, that's a volunteer board, right, the Board of Regents. So the rest of these are volunteers. This is an elected office, and I believe should be designated. So when we have this discussion in front of the full board, I believe we ought to take every one of these, and we ought to add the words, a member who is not a legislator or state school board member may not receive compensation or benefits. Because the others are appointed, volunteer. We're elected and asked to be on that. And so I think we should outline every one of those and ask for a legislative change in all the rest of those. That's my view on the appointments that say we cannot be compensated, because I think it's an oversight on their part. Every one of these other people are volunteers. We're the only other elected officials on here besides state legislators. So I think that should be changed. And it's coming at, I mean, we obviously are going to be paying for it out of our budget. There's not that many of them. But to ask a Mark Huntsman or Michelle Bolter to drive from St. George to serve on a committee such as this, and I don't think they should be prohibited or be discriminated against because they live in St. George. And I get that they are paid travel, per diem, right? That's allowed, but it still is an opportunity for her to serve, which she may not be able to otherwise. Secondly, I agree 100%. If it is not in the statute that says we cannot be paid, and it is something that the board sets up, that elected board members absolutely should be compensated. Obviously, it's not, you don't want to do it $270 because it may only be a 2-hour meeting. So I think we need to present back a plan to the full board. How should that look? And if it's a half day or if it's a 2-hour, I think we ought to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I don't think we can reduce the amount because that's a statutory amount.
But that's for a day, right?
Yes. Mhm.
$270 per day. I'm talking about you're appointed to an ad hoc committee or a committee, and it's a 2-hour meeting.
No, it's actually per meeting, but what they do is it becomes per day because you can't be paid for more than one meeting per day. So in other words, if you have 4 meetings, you can't get $270 for each meeting. You get $270 for the first meeting, even if it's for 15 minutes, but then it covers the rest of the day.
Okay, and that's in statute?
Yeah.
Where's that one in statute? Because it doesn't make any sense to have a 2-hour meeting.
No, I understand. I understand your point, but we're struggling with what we have as the statutory restrictions.
Right.
And that was a change. It used to be that way. Meetings under 4 hours got a certain amount, meetings over got a certain amount, and then we changed it to do it more like the legislature does it. The law was changed to do
Right,
it. So it's
okay.
not per hour, really.
It's a day, it's a.
Yeah.
That would be found in subsection 36-2-3, but we'll give you a better citation for that.
Here's the
Chair Levy, could I make a couple of quick comments?
Thank you, Joel. Feel free.
I do think it's really important that, like, Michelle Bolter, even if it costs more, can fly, you know, to our meetings. We are a big state, and I mean, we only have 2 board members that live south of Utah County, which is somewhat surprising, but they represent a huge portion of Utah, and they simply can't effectively represent Utah unless they can travel easily as possible. Mark doesn't have an airport in Fillmore, so he'll just have to drive. But I think that's important. And maybe the second thing is, I mean, the lawsuit is still under, you know, potentially appeal, but we could not make state school board partisan, or the legislature could not, because of our payment. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess that's maybe a question maybe once the lawsuit is filed, is resolved, and maybe for the next state school board. But what if we all went, you know, to no payment, and then we could be partisan? I'm just throwing that out there. That's probably a discussion because we've already decided how we're going to run things for this election cycle. Thanks.
Thank you, Joel.
Let me follow up with Spencer's request. It's in 36-2-3 and it's subparagraph 4. It says that the compensation shall be the same for salary members as the legislature. So this is where, as Lorian has indicated, this is where they tied it to the legislature. And unless the Legislative Compensation Commission issues a revived report, the salary for members of the State Board of Education through the calendar year 2016 is $273 per day for each calendar day that a member attends a meeting described. So it is based on, if you attend a meeting in that day, then you get $273.
So,
And you get $273 per day.
so if you keep reading, so I'm looking at 4B, for purposes of setting a salary for a member of the State Board of Education, a calendar day for the annual general session described in subsection is interpreted as a calendar day of a meeting of the State Board of Education and any other meeting authorized by the State Board of Education.
Right.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
not an attorney, right? So I'm gonna fully admit that, but B seems to say any other meeting authorized by the State Board of Education. And unless the State Legislative Compensation Commission issues a revised report on her, blah, 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 okay, 273. I don't see anything in there that says that you can't pay someone less for less than a full day.
Well, you're paid by meeting. And so if you attend
Well, it
one
says
meeting.
A calendar day for the annual general session is interpreted as a calendar day.
Yeah, so in other words,
So, one day,
right.
a meeting of the State Board of Education. I guess I'm not seeing the limiting language, or the language that expressly prohibits us from setting something, a full day, yes, but a half a day, I don't see that there's anything that says we can't do that.
Well, and what I see is this, is that there's 2 connectors. One is the meeting, and the other one is the day. So in other words, if you attend a meeting that is authorized under the statute, you get $273. But that is also covers you for the day. So it is both the meeting and the day. So what that was meant to do is it was meant to say, okay, I went to 5 meetings, therefore I get a multiplier of 273. You can only get 273 for the day regardless of the number of meetings you attend.
Okay, and in short of being reprimanded by the chair of this committee for taking too long on a topic, I'm stretching to see where you're making the nexus between meeting and day
Well,
in this statute.
Well, what it says is that you get $273 for each approved meeting, right?
Yeah, it says is $273 per day for each calendar day
Mhm.
that a member attends a meeting described in subsection 4B 1A.
IA.
Right.
But I still don't see. I
Well,
know the legislature wants to interpret this because I know them. It's 273 a day, right? And that's a meeting or a.
So can I flip it to the other side? Because as a teacher, I leave my job at, 2 o'clock to come to a 3 o'clock meeting.
Mhm.
Now I'm getting paid at school because I'm only taking 2 hours off without pay, and then I show up at my state job and I'm getting paid for the day.
Mhm.
So this is almost a conflict of what they're actually trying to create. Because
Right.
unless I take the whole day off for 273, but why should I not be at my school for half the day? So now you can almost say I'm double dipping because I'm getting paid for the day.
Well, you're getting paid, okay, there's 2 ways to look at it. One's
That's
that
why I'm
way.
just-
The other way is to say you're getting paid by the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but you cannot get paid for multiple meetings
Mm-hmm.
in that same day. So you take 2 hours off and you go to a meeting that's 2 hours, you get paid for the meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But if you went to 2 meetings in that same day,
Mm-hmm.
even if you only took 2 hours off, you went to one 20-minute meeting and another an hour and 20-minute meeting, you would only get $273 because you get paid by the meeting,
Mm-hmm.
but that also incorporates the whole day.
Mm-hmm. So,
So it's meant to try to preclude double dipping or
Yeah.
triple dipping or quadruple dipping, depending on how many meetings you put into one day. But they want to make sure that so there's 2 calculations. One, do you attend a meeting?
Mhm.
If you attend a meeting, that then incorporates the day.
okay. So I'd like to go back to Linda's point of if it's an internal, can you
Right.
restate that?
So if the board has
Mhm.
appointed us to be on that committee,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a USBE committee, then I feel like we should get paid, compensated for it. And I know Dave's point is that there were other stakeholders on there, but having been a state employee, I'll tell you, most of us are getting paid. The staff is getting paid, because it's during the day, most of them are during the day when
Mhm.
we're on salary or we're working our hourly rate or whatever.
And I don't disagree with that at all. I just wanted to let you know that the reason that it kind of evolved the way it did was there were certain meetings where you had board members who were getting paid and other invitees who sat on those committees who were outside stakeholders who were not being paid anything. And they were doing it as a volunteer. And so what they felt is that to put everyone on kind of a equal basis, that they wouldn't pay anyone. But that's where it came from. But that's certainly, within the
Having
discretion
come
of the
through
board.
PTA,
Yeah.
we don't, we know we're volunteering. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I don't think you sit at any meeting and say, oh, they're getting paid and they're getting paid and I'm not getting paid. It's, you just know you're a volunteer and you're.
Spencer, can
You're
you
there for that
repeat
reason.
your recommendation that we ask for a legislative change?
Well, so the recommendation would be that in all of those areas where the legislature is expressly, they're clearly tying us together, right?
Exactly.
In this compensation area.
That-
Not very well,
No.
might I add, but they are tying us together. So I believe that it should be where any place that it says statutorily gives an exemption to the legislature to be paid, that the state school board ought to be paid as well. And I think we ought to go through and outline all of those and point out the other thing is, I get the whole per meeting, and you could have a person say, well, I view this as this per calendar day is really detailed. It's 273 per calendar, or per day for each calendar day that a member attends a meeting. All I'm saying is, if you have one meeting in the afternoon, since we're going to be adding more, we're gonna increase our budget in this amount, because hopefully we're gonna be adding, compensation for these other committee meetings. But if you have a meeting in the afternoon, that we ought to break the day in half, and it would be $136.50, right? So if you have a meeting in the afternoon of a day and it's not a full day, it doesn't seem logical to charge the full 273, at least from the way I view it. And I don't see anything written here that says we can't do less. If it's $273 per day, but it's a committee meeting that you're coming to on behalf of the board, I don't see where it says you can't do less. And if it's per meeting and you want to chop them in half days, because it would be, if you're only coming to a 2-hour meeting, I don't think anyone on the board would expect to be paid $273. But if it's a half a day, you could break it if you want to keep their standard of a half a day, or 2 meetings and a half a day to break it in half. But,
Do you think the legislature would adjust to that?
well, they probably would, to tell you the truth, because
They get 273.
well, it ties, this statute ties us together. And they probably would object, but I still think it's worthy of bringing up to them. For sure we need to do the other thing. We need to say, you're elected officials, we're elected officials, everyone else is a volunteer is exempt, meaning they care about something and they want to talk about it, and they want to be appointed to the committee. We're going there because we're elected, and I think most people who run for the state school board know you're gonna have, well, when I ran, it was 1 day a month and an evening. We've since now turned into no evenings and during the day, and there were all these other committees that came up. So the point is, for sure we need to tie that, ask the legislature to do that, and then the second thing I think we ought to be supportive of is anything that the board assigns, it's not statutory, it ought to be paid for.
I would like to agree with those 2 recommendations. Did you have anything you'd like to add?
No, I think that's well stated and well put. I do think that one of the things that we do need to is because, as Spencer has pointed out, we're tied to the legislature. It's very clearly, it says that the salary should be the same as any member of the legislature. We would have to look and see whether the legislature has done the same thing as Spencer's indicating, which is that for each meeting you can now say, well, it's only a 2-hour meeting, so we're only going to pay you, instead of an 8-hour day, we're going to pay you only a quarter of that amount. Instead of $273, we're going to pay you $50. I don't think the legislature does that, and so that's one of the things we would have to look at, because we are supposed to be in sync with what the salary structure is with the legislature.
So I think we could look at our list judiciously and make a recommendation that would keep us in line with the legislators, but would also limit the amount of meetings people are getting paid for, but maybe increase them slightly so that it's a little bit more equitable for somebody coming from so far away. Because when I leave my job, I'm not getting paid $273. When you leave your job, you're not getting paid $273. But it is nice to have some compensation.
Right. So,
and then I'd like to ask Natalie, is this something that we can fit into our budget? And would there be some way we could have a cap or an ideal number? Or because we don't want to have this free-flowing amount of money that we're spending for the board members to go to every meeting, because that's just not why we're here. But in the same regard, it would be nice to make it a little bit more equitable for people that are traveling far or leaving their jobs.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. When we don't compensate those who are leaving their jobs, then often they don't want to be on committees, and that leaves it up to the people who don't have jobs to be on committees. It just leaves a lot of people that should be serving out of the ability to do it.
Well put.
And then also the people that live in the area. I mean, I'm on a lot of committees. I enjoy each and every one of them, but I think it's restrictive of people who are coming far. So, like, I don't want to come as far for no compensation. Thank you, Joel. Did you want to?
Chair Reed, could I make a quick comment?
Yes.
I agree, I think, with all the comments been said, but I think maybe we ought to think somewhat bigger picture for 2 reasons. I'm not sure on this, but you know, the legislature almost eliminated us. You know, the governor and Senate supported it, the House did not. But even the people who didn't vote to eliminate the House are seriously considering major changes. Also, I'm concerned also that not only do we lose some people from the state school board for not compensating them well enough, I think we're losing a lot of potential candidates for the state school board because of the time it takes. I, you know, for example, tried to recruit a number of people to run in my district. I'm not running for re-election. And when I told them about the time commitment, they said, you know, no way. I can't do that. And so here is, I think, something to consider. And I know it's somewhat of a radical change. I would like to maybe ask our AG's office to say, if we did not compensate the state school board, could we keep what the legislature passed after 2 years of deliberation, which is partisan state school board? So ask our attorney general to look at that initial judge's opinion, and then basically we pass a resolution, if they say that would work, to the legislature saying, hey, we will, starting, I don't know, maybe January 1st, 2020 or June 30th, 2020, we'll have no salary on the state school board, and it can be partisan. And if that's the way, you'll leave it, so you can restructure things. Kind of an offering of goodwill, you know, to the legislature. And also say, if it is, you know, no pay, we're looking to, you know, the state school board members would not have to give more than 15 hours a month, you know, in meetings. And that would create a different dynamic, you know, on the state school board. Maybe the board isn't interested in that, and so maybe we can't go there. I think if anyone had an interest in that, it might be worth asking our attorney general's office to say, you know, based on that legal court case from the initial judge ruling, if we went to no salary, would that be okay to have partisan state school board elections?
Joel, I disagree with you completely. We have already
Okay.
had a lawsuit that said we don't want to go partisan, and for the person that's potentially staying on the board and you're leaving the board, I do want to be compensated, so I'm going to just state that. Thanks, Dave Thomas.
No, and let me just jump in, Joel, and react quickly, and that is you already have a statute that says that your salary will be. I don't think we can come back with a legal opinion saying that you can, now you could always waive your salaries, and you can certainly decline to take it, but you can't compel anybody to do so because the statute already indicates that you will be paid a salary based on attendance and based on the factors that are found in the statute. So you run into, if you wanted to do what you're suggesting, Joe, you'll probably have to do it statutorily, and probably either that or you would have to have an acclamation of the board that everybody would have to join in that, but do it voluntarily. I don't think you could do it any other way.
Thank you, Spencer.
I think we could ask for the language to get back to, and Joel, I don't think partisan or nonpartisan are connected to what we get paid. So I would disagree a little bit, but I think that actually adding into the statute language that doesn't say we will compensate less for, you know, half a day, but more that the board, you have an option, so that you don't, so the legislature isn't feeling like, oh, they're trying to attack how much we're being paid for our 2-hour meeting. It's more of that at the board's discretion, they can change the compensation for meetings to, you know, less than $273. I think that would be the way to get it taken care of, and so I guess I'd add that as the third recommendation. One, we go through statutorily and put ourselves in right next to the legislature. Two, that our board we compensate for other meetings that the board deems necessary, and three, that we allow in the compensation language that the board may choose to set up a different pay structure as long as it does not exceed the $273 a day.
I think that's a great recommendation.
I can go with that.
Thank you.
So is that a motion? Do we need to say?
So I would move those 3 items.
So the motion would be that we create an exemption to state legislator that gets paid. The state should get paid as well. State school board should get paid as well. That's
He's got
okay.
those 3 things, yeah.
And then we create a standard where the board, at the board's discretion, we could be paid a smaller compensation.
Right.
And then the third one would be that
Our committees,
External committees, a committee that is appointed by the State School Board of Education should be compensated.
right.
Okay, those 3 recommendations. All in favor?
Aye.
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 We all look-
Joel,
Joel is aye.
Oh, you're an aye?
Joel Wright is aye.
Thank you, Joel. Oh, thank you,
Can I just
Lori.
get a little clarification on that? So we have this table
Yep.
in the policy.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want that still in there? Do you want it totally out and just a sentence in there that anything will be compensated to which board members are assigned to? Or,
I think if
Linda?
it was, I don't think we need the table. I think we just, if, put the underlying principle in there that if board members are assigned and it's a board committee, then they should be compensated.
Yes, Lori.
okay, there are things that board members are invited to that aren't board committees, and so that's one of the points. You have High School Activities Association, you have
Those are-
Chartered School
Those would
Board.
all have to be changed by statute, I think that.
No, they're not in statute.
Oh, they're
These
not in
are-
statute
These are
at
by
all.
invitation, there are many by invitation that aren't board committees, but the board members are assigned to serve on. They take, quite a
But
bit
they're
of time.
external, right? And doesn't the
Right.
statute exclude them?
No.
Well, look, I think we need to have some definition of what, for our own, our own board policy. Because I don't think that, and I'm just making stuff up here, the Magna Town Council or Magna Township would like a board member to attend their meetings, and they, whoever has been asked to attend comes and says to the board, hey, I'm going to this meeting. I think we need to set them out, what those committees are in our board, like this
They are
graph you
set out.
have.
Mhm.
And but those that are that way should be compensated.
So, yeah, that was just a clarification, because they're not all board-formed committees that people have some major assignments to, or
Right.
statutory.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you, Natalie.
Are all of those committees that you're referring to, those the representative appointed by board leadership
Yes, all of these board leadership appointments,
for the external committees?
right, or any of the internal ones as well.
Scott?
So we need to, this is great, so we need to set the budget, though. We need to know all the committees at the beginning of July, just to make sure, or before, because we're setting budgets right now. Deborah's setting the board's budget, so if there's gonna be additional pay comes out, we need to try to work on that.
Because the
Yeah.
legislature appropriates a finite amount
They do.
for
Mhm.
salary.
Yeah.
And so, in the policy right now, it says, basically, you can be compensated for these other meetings until there's no more money, so.
Right.
That's, oh, go ahead.
Or we could put a cap on
That's what I was gonna
how
say.
much it did, but yeah.
That would be nice to have a cap or a number of meetings that people can attend. And this way we can understand. I think we are trying to make a rule for with a number that we don't really know just yet. I mean, how many meetings do all of us attend? So if the number that we're asking for turns out to go from 50 to, 250 meetings, that's a big difference. I don't want to vote myself a raise by any chance, but I think that getting a better understanding of how many meetings people are actually going to and how much this would actually cost would be a very good number to know. I would like a cap on it, and I would like to have a, maybe a cap.
I don't know if a cap is necessary. I think we need the numbers first to know if a cap is
Yep.
necessary.
We'll work on that.
Okay.
So staff will
Deputy
get
Judge.
with Lorraine and we'll lay out all the meetings or potential meetings and then calculate the cost and come back with that estimate, okay?
Okay, so
That's okay.
would we be taking our recommendation to the full board, or would we wait off until next month?
I
Would
think
you
we can make it part of the motion you just made,
Mhm.
so that, we can tie it into that, so when it does go back to the full board next month, we have that as backup.
Okay,
I
thank you.
think that would be okay. That'd be great, so.
Excellent.
I think Spencer made a good point. I think when they changed their compensation a couple of years ago, I think they probably didn't go into statute and find all of those little areas where it says that we can't be compensated. And so those are probably things that we need to bring up with the legislature as well.
Thank you.
One
Yes.
other matter, Linda, did you want to raise the other issue that, because we have in this particular document, we also have the participation electronically and being compensated.
Oh, that's right.
Oh.
I wondered how you guys felt about that. Do you think that people should be, I mean, we kind of talked last month about it a little
Yep.
bit.
If you're attending electronically?
Yes, should you be compensated if you're attending electronically?
And the basic notion, I'm sorry to jump in, but the basic notion was, is we went through and made a change in the bylaws, and that it was necessary to make a change in the bylaws under the Open Meeting Act to be able to have an electronic meeting and to be able to form a quorum by way of having those participate by electronic medium. And that was necessary to make that change in the bylaws, which then created the ripple effect to say that if you can officially attend to form the quorum as part of electronic, electronic media, whatever, whether it's by computer or by telephone, if that is now deemed to be an appropriate attendance for the purposes of creating a quorum, then the question is you're now attending officially, shouldn't you be compensated as if you were here? And because that's really kind of the intent of the whole electronic the electronic attendance under the bylaws. So we made a change in the compensation to say that if you do that and you do it and electronically, you're compensated as if you're here. And then Linda raised.
Well, actually, it was Joel who said he didn't like it, and he came in electronically all the time. So the only thing is, when I've come in electronically, sometimes I'm only come in for like one vote,
Mhm.
right? And then I come back out because I'm busy doing something else, and so I don't.
Yeah, you can always decline you always decline saying, look, I didn't participate sufficiently that I feel that I now have attended that meeting for that purpose, but that's always something you can do on your own election. But as far as the policy is concerned,
Mhm.
I think that for consistency, we need to say, if you're attending for the purpose of creating a quorum, and that's necessary to have the meeting, that you probably ought to be treated like anybody else.
Mhm. Thank you.
Well, I would say also, it's never automatic. Even if you're there physically, it's not automatic. You have to sign that you were there.
Yep.
The same as someone participating electronically would have to somehow
Come in
give
and
us an
sign?
affidavit or sign or send something. So it's totally your election whether you would get paid for that if you feel you participated enough. But yeah, it wouldn't be automatic ever.
I would like to defer to the people who attend electronically. I have not attended electronically.
I don't think I have heard one person attend electronically for more than 15 minutes.
Yep.
Joe may be the exception today in this committee meeting, mainly because he's can't move around. And so my attitude is I don't think, I get establishing a quorum, that all of that makes sense in the whole definition, but practically it doesn't make sense. But I don't think you can separate it out. If a person comes in and I think the only thing you can do is say that the individual has the ability to decline the payment if it's done electronically. Because someone may in the future come on and stay the whole
Mhm.
meeting. I feel bad for them because it's a terrible way to participate. But
It is.
yeah, I think that's the best way to do it cleanly, is say that an electronic meeting follows the same rules. The board member has the right to waive that electronic meeting
Yep.
payment.
I would agree. Do we need to take a vote?
This is Joel. I've attended more electronic meetings than anyone. But I don't think you should get paid for attending electronically. I just think you do more when you're there in person, and I think that's fine. But I don't feel strongly about it, so whatever, fine.
Thank you, Joel. With that, let's move on to,
Thanks.
thank you so much for your time. Move on to 1.4.
1.4 is the annual report on financial and single audit reviews, so Natalie's going to present that to the committee. Memo, or I can bring up both?
Just bring up the spreadsheet. Okay. So as part of, one of the board's statutorily required activities is to review all of the financial and single audits that are required by statute. The superintendent is required to make comments to the LEAs, communicate noncompliance, as well as we have requirements under the federal Omni Circular to follow up on any findings related to federal compliance. This is just a report on our annual activity. My staff worked on this diligently through the session. This is hot off the presses as of last night, so there may be a few revisions. We will post the final version up on our website as we go through our final tasks associated with this. A couple of things that I wanted to point out. There are 41 school districts and 115 charter schools who completed their financial and single audits as required. 7 of the charter schools are in their planning year, and so they only had to do limited agreed upon procedures, not a full financial statement audit. All of the LEAs received unqualified opinions on their financial statements, which is good. Qualified opinions are not good, and we didn't have any of those, so that's great. 34 school districts and 4 charter schools obtained federal single audits. Just for the record, we have some data inconsistencies on the summary sheet that I noticed this morning, so we'll get that corrected and reposted. There are some school districts that indicated, the sheet itself indicates that they did not get single audits, and they did in fact do so, so we want to make sure that reflects appropriately. The federal single audit threshold is $750,000. Most of our charter schools, as like I indicated, there's only 4 charter schools that got single audits. Most of them are not required to have them by statute. For the specific audit findings, so for those of you who have maybe attended audit committee or have been in audit committees in local school districts, the auditors come in and they make reports to the local boards and superintendents, management, informing them of significant findings. We have the same activity happen here. The most significant finding is a material weakness. Material weaknesses are things that are I'm just going to call them really, really bad, and they're things that need to be corrected immediately. The next level are significant deficiencies. So in the realm of material weakness, we had 3 school districts and no charter schools for which material weaknesses were identified by their external auditors. 2 findings, there were 2 specific findings that were noted. One was that district policies were not followed in relation to purchase order and construction payments. The other one was related to bank accounts not being reconciled throughout the years. Significant deficiencies, there were 5 districts and 1 charter school for which significant deficiencies were identified. There were 6 deficiencies in total statewide. One was related to transactions not being reported in the accounting system during the fiscal year. One is related to lack of segregation of duties and inadequate internal controls over accounting function. Lack of expertise to prepare financial year-end statements, accruals, or significant audit adjustments, and improper use of federal or state funds. So the so what of this discussion is that by law, both state and federal, the State Board of Education is required to monitor these findings, to follow up with our LEAs, and receive corrective action plans. As of, I believe, this week, we have sent out corrective action follow-up letters to everyone who had one of these findings. We also go through and apply some other state-level compliance steps that we do and follow up on those as well. One thing that we did do differently this year, for those LEAs who provided responses in their financial and single audits that we felt addressed the issue, we just considered that a final determination and noted that to the LEAs so they don't have to respond twice. For those who had these big or significant issues, this will result in either site visits from our federal programs. It could result in question costs. It could result in us having the LEAs submit corrective action plans. For all the LEAs that have to submit a response back to this office, that response needs to be signed by the superintendent of the LEA or the director, as well as their board chair or audit committee chair. We do take these follow-ups very seriously. This activity is the springboard of our risk assessment that we do for our LEAs, which impacts a lot of the federal and state compliance activities that we undergo every year. So the summary, there's 2 documents in board docs. There's a memo that goes through the things that I just talked about if you want to refer back to it later. And there's also this summary sheet that will give you some perspective as to what the findings were for the districts or LEAs that you represent. Like I said, this one has some errors on it, and so we will get it corrected today and get it updated appropriately. And we post this on our website as well, but if you have any questions or if any of the LEAs have questions, we're happy to answer them or help them through that process.
Board Member Hansen's going to ask a question, and then I will ask a question.
So it looks like we have a lot of charters who require a response. And I guess, Natalie, what are we doing to help them so that this doesn't happen in the future? We just send somebody out and say this is the way. Is it because they have a lot of turnover? I mean, do you see a reason why that we have so many that are on this list?
yes, all those things. A lot of the issues that we fall into with our charters, they have a lot of turnover in their fiscal staff. Some of the findings that we're following up, without looking at each one individually, the standard ones that I'm used to seeing are program accounting. So one of the findings I talked about was not recording accounting transactions in their records throughout the year. That's actually a violation of accounting principles. It's now a violation of board rule. We find that a lot, and that results in a lot of non-compliance, both state and federal. Some of that is just based on inexperience, inadequate systems, turnover. Right now, we don't have a dedicated person or enough bandwidth to get somebody out and train all of our new charter schools, or even those who struggle. And that's something that we've been trying to figure out how to mitigate. Right now, we're kind of triaging instead of having the opportunity to go out and take care of that stuff before. So some of the findings that we ran across this year was related to some of our charter schools not approving their budgets on time or not adjusting them timely. There was a change in a law about 2 years ago. Previously, charter schools were exempt from some of the budgetary procedures and compliance acts, and we were able to get that modified so all LEAs were treated equitably. What that means is that LEAs have to get their budgets approved by their board on the same deadline, which is previously was June 22nd, and that they're not allowed to expend in excess of the budget that had been approved. And we found that a lot of LEAs didn't make adjustments to their budgets. Some of the other findings would be federally related, which are things that we have to follow up on. I'd have to go through and look at all of them individually, but the findings that I'm seeing look fairly consistent with the things we've seen last year. I think that this might actually represent a little bit of a reduction of charter schools having to follow up. I know it's still a lot, but for some of the issues we're quite concerned, especially the program accounting issue. It is a huge significant issue now, and it will become much more prevalent as we get into school level reporting, that we won't have the data that we need to complete those activities. So we're trying to come up with some training programs and come up with some webinars or things that can help. We're in discussions right now internally with how we're going to message some of this as we move into the next fiscal year so we can help people establish appropriate practices.
Okay, thanks. That's what I was wondering, if you could do something online so that when they hire a new person, they say, hey, you have to watch this before you can start. Thanks.
Thanks. My question was, I know that we're all doing our very best, and I think it's really great that we're working on making things more transparent. From your statement, it doesn't sound like anybody's acting maliciously. It's kind of just they don't have the things in place. And I think that's a great thing to point out, that none of this is malicious or hiding money. It's all about just clerical errors.
Well, audits aren't designed to detect that.
Mm-hmm.
Audits are designed to detect things that don't appear to comply with policy or practice. And so I don't know that we have enough data to indicate generally people don't do things maliciously. They do it because they don't know. Mm-hmm. And so I would concur that most of our LEAs are very receptive to technical assistance, to suggestions, to guidance. We have LEAs that call every day asking for help, asking for clarification. And so I would say, like, almost all of them either aren't asking questions because they don't know there's a problem, or they don't know who to call. And so we want to take steps to make sure that we get them to the appropriate people to answer their questions, and that we're providing enough resources that they can do the things they need to do with the resources they have.
And I asked that question because when I ran for office, people constantly asked me about transparency, and they brought up 2 or 3 articles in the paper that people were misusing their funds, and I'm just trying to say that we are very aware of all of our schools and the money that's being transacted. So thank you for all the work you do. It's overwhelming how much you do. Any other questions?
Board Chair Reeby, can I ask a few questions?
Yes, you can, Joel. Thank you.
Natalie, it's my impression, and I want to tell me if I'm wrong or I'm missing something, that the larger, school districts like Alpine or Davis, have a lot of talented people who have been there, 10 years or more, and they just don't have a problem doing this. They're quite good at it. What about the smaller school districts? Maybe only have 1 or 2 people in their business office. I mean, are they able to do this? I mean, for example, on SEC reporting requirements, we have, for publicly traded companies, they get much bigger as you get bigger. I mean, are the small school districts able to do this with 1 or 2 people?
Well, I think that you've keyed on the two things that make these activities either doable or not doable. In a larger district, you have more staff and more sophisticated and robust systems. They dedicate more resources and time because they have to. They have a lot of moving parts. Keeping track of 6 schools versus 400 is a significantly different conversation. In our smaller LEAs, whether they're districts or charters, they often don't have the same sophistication in their systems that our big districts do. They do a lot more things manually. They don't have as many people. They aren't able to execute a significant amount of internal controls or segregation of duties without involving their board. And so there's differences in size and personnel just based on exactly what you indicated, big versus little. I think that some of our school districts have banded together and established the framework for an accounting system, but keep in mind that every LEA has the ability to implement that system differently. They execute different internal controls, different workflows. They have different staff that interact with those systems and that complete all the reporting activities. So it just kind of depends on how the LEAs have chosen to structure their business practices. And again, we try to provide guidance. We try through some of our, so the work that we're doing here to consolidate systems and consolidate data requests to help the LEAs so they're not reporting as much double data. But you know, to say how well everyone's able to execute based on their size, some that are really small do a great job, and some of that is experience, being around for a while, having a knowledge of what we're doing, and others, it's our biggest issue is turnover.
Natalie, in the Utah legislature, I mean, we have many similar reporting requirements on cities, and there's like class 4 of cities, and you know, under 10,000, over 10,000, over 50. Do you think it makes sense to maybe classify our LEAs in a similar way and have different reporting requirements based on your size?
I think from the state perspective, we are required to report the same information for our LEAs regardless of what size they are to both the state legislature and to the federal government. And so, you know, we don't really have a lot of latitude to make adjustments based on size.
We don't, exactly. Would it make sense to have latitude based on their size, potentially?
Well, one barrier to that I see from the federal perspective is that the data that's gathered formulates the federal funds that come back to our state. And so if we didn't provide the same level of information, we wouldn't have the federal resources that go back to fund teachers and resources for our schools. When data gets, that's why we make such a big deal about data being accurate and timely, is when we don't report things accurately and timely, it all the time has repercussions for funding sources. I believe that the board in the state has a lot more latitude with state programs, but with federal, right now, we don't have as much.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. The second question, and you might laugh at this, and that's fine. I have been a scoutmaster in the LDS Church many times, and one thing I've tried to emphasize is that no one can be a competent scoutmaster unless they have the job for at least 5 years. It's very complicated, and there's so many things to do. And frequently in the LDS Church, people change every year or two, and it gets really messy and dysfunctional. If I can be harsh, I see that same thing at our charter schools, maybe even our school districts, but certainly at our charter schools. I see very few of our charter schools doing a good job on this unless they hire one of the 3 or 4 prominent management companies, or they have someone who gets in that job and stays there for 5 years or more. I think that when you have constant turnover at that position and you're at a smaller charter school, you're just asking for dysfunction. I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that I would agree that that's a consistency that we even find here in this building. When we have transition or people move out, we all the time find things that we didn't know, or find requirements or things that we either are or aren't complying with. One of the things that we've been working on, we have a lot of things that we're working on. The implementation of the grants management system, I think, will help a lot. When we can get all of our grants in the same place using the same rules and guidelines, I think that'll reduce a lot of the complexity. Our finance formulas are quite complicated, and so for one person for a somebody to step into the shoes of a business administrator at a district and understand all the implications of local tax decisions, implications of state funding formulas, grants, bonds. I mean, there's lots of really complex issues that are involved in school finance, and so our hope is that we can start working as we kind of true up as we get our house in order and we get the grants management system online, that we can start developing training resources so that when we do onboard somebody or somebody comes in the middle of the year, we can write a handbook or a guidebook for them. Obviously, it would require helping and interpreting that, but at least they would have something to start with. We do have the remnants of an old accounting manual that is sort of helpful, but not really, and it would be great if we could start work to revise that. It's on our list of things to do. We've been trying to get to it for a couple of years. I think we're getting closer to getting to it, but that's something that I think would be beneficial for all sides of districts and charters both, is to have some kind of at least 101 guide to help them through making some decisions and understanding what's going on.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm blunt with our charter schools. If they don't hire one of the 3 management companies or hire someone who's competent, who's going to stay there for 5 years or more, and then if they leave, help the transition, they're going to have trouble. And I think that the long list that Linda pointed out is emblematic of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Joel. Any other thoughts and concerns? Great. Do you need a motion from us for any of this?
I believe this is information.
Thanks. So it's now 10:26. We are halfway through our list, not really, but I was hoping more. So let's try to be a little bit more expedient in our conversation so we can move a little quicker. 1.5.
So this is just an informational update from me to you as Finance Committee members on the Enterprise Grants Management System. Again, just some background on this. There was legislation 2 sessions ago now? 3 sessions ago now. Representative Fossen sponsored the bill. And the bill basically said that all of the agencies across the state need to be into at least one system, like a grantee system that shows all the federal grants that we all receive. So we progressed with this, and Natalie and a member of our team who's not with us now were part of the RFP process, which involved USPE, DWS, Health, who else? I mean, the executive agencies on that too. So a particular vendor was selected, that's REI, and since I first started in this position, I've been along the lines of an enterprise system, and so the Enterprise Grants Management System, at the cost of the USPE, no cost to the districts, we can enter into those. We've had several districts, charter schools, that have complained about the UCA system, how antiquated it is, different parts of that. So we look at this as an opportunity to get into a better system that meets our needs as a education organization. The thing with it is, though, is typically with these types of projects that are large scale, at this point, they're coming out next week, and we're really wanting to see a demonstration of the system end-to-end on 2 particular grants or programs, special education and child nutrition program. So we're going to take a look at those next week, and after that I will come back to the board and let you know exactly what we feel is still lacking in the system or potentially could be improved in the system, and then make a determination on that. Because, and I agree with this, they have pathways within the systems, and we do want to expand and have more detail and a higher performing system than probably some of the other states, or I won't say probably, than other states do, such as Ohio, Florida, Rhode Island. I think Washington is on board now with them. So we're going to really make sure, though, that it's cost effective, that the benefits of the system outweigh the cost, because we're creeping up towards around $2 million, which is fine, because we were appropriated or given about $4.7 million to 4.3, I think, to get into the systems. that we've been discussing and talking about that. So we're not necessarily over budget, but we actually want to make sure that we can come back to you and say, yep, we're getting what we need out of this system for the price that we're paying for the system. Because in addition to the development of the system or the building of the system to meet our grants management needs, I'm not just talking about federal grants, I'm talking about state. We've also added an MSP component to it. We want to make sure that it's value added. And again, that it has the least amount of impact on the LEAs. The timing of this too, about going live in it, is part of the process, is ensuring that they're trained, that we identify who the users will be, and that's going to be coming up in the next couple of months. So we wanted to make sure you were advised of that too. And I wanted to ask too, is if I should invite board members to come to the demos next week if they want to. I mean, I'm not sure that you would have, that would be value added to take your time on that, but if you trust the staff and see that we were able to make a decision on, what the capabilities are of the system at this point. Again, we've been going on now close to a year with them since the awarding of the contract at the state level. This is not a USBE contract or specific scopes of work. This is a state level contract, so we have to work closely with state finance. We have to do other things, but again, we are driven towards ensuring that we get the most of the system, that it benefits us and our LEAs. The cost is also important, but we anticipated that the type or level of system that we want would cost quite a bit of money comparatively with UCA. So by way of comparison, UCA costs us at least about $160,000 a year to maintain and sustain. So if you look at the cost of that over a 5-year period, you're upwards of close to $1 million just to sustain that.
There's only 14 grants in the UCA.
And there's only 14 grants in the UCA. We want to get all of the federal and state grants into one system, end to end. So right now, I feel confident about the price tag. However, I want to see what the system does for us, because our staff has given them all sorts of documents and things like that. So that's next week. I just want to make sure you knew that was next week. We're really going to make a determination on if the vendor has given us what we've been asking for. Okay. So subject to any questions, we just want to make sure you stay informed.
Okay. Can you send an invitation to us for
I can,
administration?
sure.
Thanks.
Yep.
I'm a visual learner, and
Absolutely.
I'd love to maybe see part of it.
We're hoping with this system that one of the things that the UCA doesn't provide by way of design is that we would have an overall dashboard for our LEAs as well. Right now, our LEAs have to go 19 different places to get all the information that they need from us, and that when the system is finished and implemented, they'll only have to go to one place. Same with our staff; they'll only have to go to one place. This system replaces some of the functions that the base system that we have and are taking down fulfills for us. Some of those processes have been done manually over the last year by staff, and that interjects all sorts of risk, as well as some of the issues that we talked about with our LEAs of turnover and transition. So the system, we've been building internal controls in the system to help mitigate some of the problems that we've seen in the past, to help eliminate user error, those kinds of things. If we can become operational the way that we have it designed, we think that it'll make our agency more efficient. It'll provide tools and resources to our LEAs that they currently don't have. And we think that that is definitely worth all the work that we're putting into the system. So that's kind of our objective from the third party side as to why it would benefit everybody in public ed, not just this building.
Any questions? Thanks. Do you feel that you have the support that you need to get this done? And is there any other support that you need for this to happen?
If you can give us more time to get it ready, that'd be awesome. But I think, as always, our implementation issues are centered around having enough people to do all the work that's necessary to get it done and having enough time. Our timelines are of critical importance, and again, based on the demo and the information that comes out next week, we may have to make some adjustments to the timelines. So.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move on to 1.6, Deputy Jim.
So 1.6, we want to just orient the Finance Committee members to all of the different tasks that occur upon the conclusion of the legislative session. So there's two documents in the backups. What Chair Huntsman had asked for is this summary or task or summarized task of all of the different tasks that have to occur by your staff following a legislative session. We wanted to start with the minimum school program first, and Natalie can speak to this. And if you want to invite Jamie Barrett, she's your MSP coordinator, up to the table to talk about all of the different moving pieces and parts that take place after the last day of the session or the last week of the session. We can do so. But again, at your hand is the summary that was put together by Natalie and her staff on all of the different actions that take place across the financial ops arena. It doesn't necessarily mean that no one else, or that we're the only, the financial ops is the only section having to adjust to the different requirements coming out of the session. But the internal accounting piece to it, you know, we're way ahead of schedule with Deborah building the budgets for, you know, both the internal staff budget and, or your internal office budget. And we hope to start to present that next month with approval going way ahead of the beginning of the next fiscal year. That was one of the things we promised would get better with the changes that we made and the orientation of the staff. One particular piece to this, so I'll just scroll through this and see if there's any questions by any of the finance committee members on all of the different actions and activities that take place. You've heard a lot about implementation. So we come out of the legislative session and we get particular bills that, you know, the legislature wants to see enacted quickly. One of the biggest parts or pieces to the process, and Zach is here from procurement, is making sure that we identify all of the past, meaning bills that passed that will have procurement requirements to them. So his staff, Faye in particular, has gone through and created a tracker that we can make available to you that shows what you know, provisions or would necessitate his staff working towards an RFP with the internal staff, the different sections that are affected. Because what we found is that typically when it comes to implementation, the procurement process seems to be the one that slows things down, not because of necessarily because, or unnecessarily because of poor performance or anything, but just because of all the codes and the rules that are associated with that. The time frame becomes compacted, and then we either miss a deadline or come over the top on that. So,
Scott, can I just ask a question to make this easier for me to understand?
Sure.
Can you take a bill like maybe elementary school counseling, because I'm really familiar with that because that was the one that I was working on.
Right, so it's right here on the chart.
And just tell me, now that that's passed, tell me specifically what the process is to go through for it.
So for the elementary school counselor bill, from what I can remember, largely this creates a grant program for our LEAs. So the first step would largely be the programmatic staff working with policy, making sure that we have good rules in place in order for our staff to know how to establish a grant program. What are the terms and conditions? What are the requirements? During that rulemaking process, financial operations and accounting would be involved. I don't believe with elementary counselors we'd have to do any kind of RFP or procurement, but what we would have to do is set up the terms of the grant. Make sure that the money makes it to the right accounts, make sure that we appropriately communicate to the LEA what the criteria is. With the new, if and when we get our new grants management system up and running, we would use that system to manage, aside from the rule, most of that communication. Right now, a lot of that happens in spreadsheets and emails, and that's hard to track sometimes. I think one thing that's important to note, and it doesn't really come out in these sheets, is that the legislative session ends, and I think the general public thinks that we do a lot of this work in July when the new fiscal year begins, and that's not the case for either us or our LEAs. Our LEAs are required to set their budgets by June 22nd. I think that might have got moved to June 30th this year. Yay. But in order to get to that point, our LEAs have to know what their allocations are for the minimum school program, if there's any new programs, if programs change, This year, there are a lot of changes related to taxes and property taxes, and LEAs have to go through and analyze how all of those impacts affect their local revenue and how that'll affect their state money. And so a lot of the work that happens and a lot of the things on that word sheet that we put before you all have to get done in the next 3 weeks in order for us to appropriately communicate to our LEAs what the impacts are to them, what we foresee happening for them, so that they can use that information with their local boards to make decisions. Some of these grant programs generally go second after the minimum school program. The rules, procurements, terms and conditions of all the grant programs will happen somewhere between June, August, that kind of thing. So one of our major imperatives is making sure we get the calculations right and then setting the appropriate rules or conditions or policies to ensure that all our LEAs are treated consistently, that they have the same opportunities as everyone else to apply. Making sure getting all this information out in a timely manner is imperative for our LEAs to make decisions about the teachers they hire, the classes they're going to offer. And so all of this work, basically, by the time July rolls around, we're done. I mean, we're largely done May-ish, with the exception of rules and grant programs that we're implementing. So there's a lot of work that has to happen internally. Once we get some of these procurements underway, the IT will have to execute, and our data and statistics staff. A lot of training that has to happen to the staff at the LEA level if we have to collect new kinds of data. If we have to make adjustments to student information systems, those specifications have to then be communicated to external vendors. Because it's not just our systems that have to be adjusted, it's all of the LEA systems. And so anytime we make any kind of a switch or we change things or we add a program, external systems have to be updated as well. So there's quite a conveyor belt of things that have to happen between now and the beginning of the fiscal year in July.
Thank you. Now, I would also like to ask a question. I'm looking at this Excel sheet that you have provided for us, and it is unbelievably amazing. My question is, you have asked that you need more time, and my request to you is that if we ever ask a question, and in the back of your head you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to take me forever to create, because I'm looking at this, and your statement says that we've asked for this. Do you find this document helpful? Is it something that you would create without us asking for it? Because this document looks like it took forever. And I just hope that this is something that you've done in the past, is something that's helpful for you, because this concerns me that stuff that we're asking you is taking away time from stuff that might be time better spent. So that's kind of a loaded question, but I would like you to give us feedback whether you think that sometimes our requests are a little cumbersome, because you do have a lot on your plate, and I can't buy you more time, I can't give you more people, but I can limit my requests.
I think from the perspective of this, I know our procurement staff pulled this together.
It's amazing.
And put it together. I know they were able to utilize some of the work done by legislative staff and internally, but doing the analysis is something that I can't speak as to whether they would have done it this week or not, but we're working towards having a kickoff meeting for our sections to talk through priority. Because as you can imagine, as you go through this list, there's quite a few things that are yellow. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made both at the programmatic level and at the board level in order for my staff to be able to do their work. And so I think one thing that we always kind of run into barriers with is when we don't get clear direction, we can't do the things that we need to do. We're trying to make sure that our internal staff know what the expectations are. We're putting together a priority list so they know what order their procurement is. There's only a limited number of people that can execute these activities. We have to write RFPs. In addition to this is the new stuff. This isn't the stuff that's going on every day. We have a lot of contracts that are expiring right around the end of the fiscal year, and so trying to balance out how to keep business going and how to get new things up and running. I think my primary frustration over the past couple of years is that we're trying to communicate better so that we can manage everyone's expectations. Our phones have been ringing off the hook all week. LEA's wanting their numbers specifically, do this calculation for me, run these scenarios for me. We want to be really helpful and we want to be really receptive, but when we take time and stop to do everything everyone asks us instead of compiling or putting things together for a whole, it delays. And so trying to manage everyone's expectations, trying to get information pulled together in a timely manner so we can communicate to everyone at the same time. We have a bunch of meetings scheduled in the next couple of months. I think from our perspective, getting the support of our sections and our LEAs to be a little bit patient for a couple weeks so that we can get everything pulled together, but then to come to the trainings and meetings that we schedule. Oftentimes we schedule these, we put all this work and effort into it, and people don't come. And they want us to provide one-on-one guidance or training to them. And there's lots of circumstances where we completely understand that, but we can't do that for everyone, especially as we continue to get bigger. On our end, we're trying to make sure if we have meetings here, that we broadcast them, that we record them, so people can listen to them later. We realize that a lot of our LEAs have to travel. They don't necessarily want to come or are able to come to Salt Lake. So we're trying to utilize our technology to make sure that we're making those opportunities available to everybody. Kind of back to the transition conversation. Sometimes our LEAs aren't open yet or don't have people in place to receive this information. And so, again, just making sure we have those training opportunities available so that we can teach everyone in a efficient manner instead of a lot of the one-on-one counseling would be helpful.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, so please remember that if there's anything we ask of you that would take away from something that is more pressing, please
We
feel
generally
free.
let Scott know.
Okay.
He usually knows.
Please feel free to make us aware of that too, because this is an amazing document with lots of information that I'm totally impressed with. So thank you for all you do. Moving on to 1.7.
1.7 is a amendment to a rule, so if the chair would invite Ben Rasmussen forward to lead out on this discussion.
Ben Rasmussen, please
Or
come forward.
This is an action.
I feel like the Price is Right. Please come forward. Yeah.
You're the next contestant.
And Paula, thank you, Paula.
And Paula, sorry, Paula.
Paula Plant.
So, if it's okay, I'll ask Paula to explain this rule. This was, this were edits that were prepared at the recommendation of the Trust Advisory Committee, and so I'll defer to her unless there are questions I can help with.
You may recall, about a year ago, the board reconstituted the Trust Advisory Committee, which is advisory to you as a board. And they took up a couple of items this year, and this is a result of one of the items. So it's coming to you from that advisory committee. What you're seeing on this, on the actual rule change, there are some changes Ben has made for us consistent with the recodification, so it's reflecting the new sections of code. But the part that you really will care about are on pages 6 and 7. That's the substantive part. And the discussion that the Trust Advisory Committee took up was to have a conversation about the definition in the law that says school interest plans need to be academic and need to have a direct impact on the instruction of students. And so in the past, that has been somewhat narrowly defined. As the fund has grown larger, and you've heard conversations like even yesterday about a larger distribution that will happen next year, the group had the conversation. We met with specialists here at the state Board of Education to try and give a broader thought process to what academic would mean. And this is the language that resulted with the help of Ben. He did some cleanup stuff for us. The items in A and B are obviously indicating that this concept of multi-tiered support would be included in academic, as would support services like counselors and family engagement kind of things. So that's basically the change in the rule. The other thing is on the second page, where for several years there's been a $5,000 limit for behavioral programs. So it's not the second page, sorry, it's the 7th page. Where there had been a $5,000 component where schools could spend money up to $5,000 on a behavioral, civic education, those kinds of things, if it was directly tied to an academic goal. But since many of the things are now going to be, the behavioral things are now going to be defined as academic, it really just
Board Member Hanson would like to ask a question first.
So I was amazed at all the work you guys did on this, and I really, really appreciate it. I just have one question. You know, when I first got on the board and we took out those lists of things that were approved and not approved, I don't want to go back to that. So my question is, why did you feel like this needed to be included in the rule instead of just telling everybody, okay, it's okay now, instead of, does that make sense to you?
I think so. I think that we wanted direction from you, that our ideas were consistent with what you wanted, since this really is a change.
It's a big change.
It's a big change.
Mhm.
I would like to explain perhaps part of the reason for the list, which I know has been controversial, is that immediately after the board adopted the rule the last time, we immediately started getting phone calls saying, give us better direction. We don't understand what this means. And so what my predecessor tried to do was to list things that had been approved in the past and things that hadn't been approved in the past that were consistent.
Staff, because, I'll just speak for myself, but I would block off Wednesday, just to make follow-up on any of the committee actions you guys take leading into the board,
Mhm.
thing like that. I think that would give Cammie time to do
Mhm.
the notes, it just.
But we've also, when we did the change, it was very radical. So we
Yes.
moved from Friday to Thursday. We were going Thursday night and then Friday morning. Now we're doing these committees in the morning.
Yeah.
So we have a full afternoon, it's not as rushed, but.
You must want to weigh in.
Superintendent Dixon, do you have something you'd like to share with us?
I do. We have these conversations a lot in our office about the schedule. Just two things. One is that when the board sets their agenda, other organizations set their agendas around board meeting. And so that's one thing to be mindful, that calendars are kind of set for the year, and we plan everything around that yearly calendar. So when you make these decisions, that's important. The second thing is that travel. So you have people who travel up to be up or down and stay over in the valley, members of your own board, as well as if there's a superintendent, for example, assigned to come and be at board meeting, because they, local board members as well as superintendents make various assignments. So for them to come and have to split that over a 3-day period might be very challenging. So the day-to-day is helpful rather than the evening. Today, I think it helps board members be more fresh, to have a good night's sleep in between, and it certainly helps staff turn things around. But a lag of a day in between the two, I would have concerns about just for travel.
I think those are all appropriate comments. I'd just like to say, when the schedule was changed, nobody consulted me
Mhm.
about my travel
Yeah,
schedule,
yeah.
about setting it for the year. All of a sudden, board meetings were moved to Thursday. And I think the first group we would check with would be the board, and then we'd worry about all the other organizations out there. All that being said, I am so happy with however you want to do it. I just saw this memory lag for 30 days.
It's
And,
hard.
That's the
and
biggest
somebody
challenge.
asked Laura yesterday, I'd like to ask Laura why she objected to this. And she looked around and went, I don't know. I don't remember. I was in the heat of the discussion. And I think there was a reason why she objected to it in the heat of the discussion, but we're not going to be informed by that now because it was 30 days ago. So I don't care how it works. I'm happy to do whatever, because as you know, I have 8 more meetings. So I can suffer through 8 more meetings, however you want to do it.
I would like to agree with Spencer. I was not asked, I was kind of told, and my schedule was set, and I think that was a tough change for many of us, so I agree with you on that statement. Superintendent Dixon?
Yeah, we're here to serve you, so we'll roll with whatever. Those are just points that I want to add to the discussion, but I do think that the biggest challenge for staff, since that was the question that you were asking, is that lag time.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
just very, especially if you ask us to bring something back and the field is waiting for something.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I hated torturing staff.
Yep.
I hate torturing staff to begin with, like, my snide remark about the .047 individuals. But torturing them at night, in the evening, late into the evening, is even worse. So I love that it's during the day.
Yep.
I think it's great. I do want to I do get there's a lot of pressure in trying to get things ready for board meeting. But if we keep board meeting on the same day, which is Thursday, which I think is what everybody has it set on, even if you went to Wednesday morning
Thursday.
and then you were done Wednesday morning and we just kind of like we're doing now, then they still
Flip it
can
to
stay
Wednesday,
overnight.
Thursday.
But then you have the afternoon, as long as we don't load it up with, I mean, I don't know why, I'm going to say this and, because I will and everybody can hate me after, but I don't know why we don't make, we used to, when did this turn into 2 full days?
I agree.
I mean, I have no idea what has happened.
I agree.
But we used to cram the USDB, the Utah Schools of Deaf and Blind meeting into the same day we did the board meeting, and then we flipped that to the day that we go do the works, half a day for the, committees, and, I mean, this is what I'm gonna do. This top row of the board leadership, I'm gonna tear them off the page. So it's just the rest, they're not listening to us. But
That was quite the visual.
So, I mean,
Point of order.
it's just, and then we're gonna do this work session this afternoon on, child safety, and that's important, and school safety, that's important, and I wanna be here, but it's turned into now 2 full days. And it used to be, in the beginning, a half a day, well, it used to be an evening, which was treacherous to the staff, so I agree that shouldn't continue on, and then the full day of, I mean, I'll commit for the next 8 meetings to hardly say anything.
You would
No,
commit to that?
I think it's,
Is
I
that
think
a-
it's a
can you
good
put that to
Is
idea.
that on
minutes?
the record?
I think it's something that we should ask we should make
Revisit.
a motion.
I mean, let's see if there's gonna be, and let's let the staff, I'll be here whenever, but we gotta.
Or not here.
Or not here. During our discussion I'm gonna actually designate this highway patrol trooper to sit in for me for school safety conversation.
Superintendent Dixon.
I certainly don't want to speak for how all staff members feel, but I do think from a staff perspective, two back-to-back days is helpful during the day, so we appreciate that. I think you may want to consider having a discussion about how to solve those problems that resulted in what you're doing now. And one was board members who serve on other committees feeling like they don't have enough time to make decisions that you bring to them out of committee. So that's part of where you had these lengthened board meetings.
Oh, I get that.
And then the other part is just to your point, Board Member Stokes, about study sessions and a lot of stuff that gets put in, and it's prior leadership, before this leadership, feeling like you all needed to be informed about a lot of details. So I think if you can figure out how we keep you informed, are there better ways to do it? We've been talking about contracting with somebody that makes those wonderful black line. You've seen those little
Yes.
videos where you're trying to explain something and you get somebody that sort of scripts it out, so you have this visual while you hear the overlay. We're going to start doing some of that for the field, and maybe there's some things that if we can do some simple.
Please wait for
Yes.
8. Please wait for 8 more meetings to do that.
I'm talking about two on your own time
Oh,
to be
okay.
informed.
That's it. If I have to sit through a board meeting and watch a video
No,
of
no,
the
no, no.
whiteboard, I was gonna like.
I'm just thinking about ways
But-
to really give you the information
and I
you
do
need, so
know-
you don't feel like there's so much coming at
Sorry,
you.
sorry Kathleen, I'm jumping in. I do know the reason why we moved to, this month ahead was because there were people who wanted to study every jot and tittle of everything we did, but that's why I think we have staff. And so jots and tittles should be left to you.
I'm Jot, she's Tittle.
Okay, all right. So they should be left to you, but maybe that half a day in between is enough for them to look at that. I mean, if we do it on, flip it, so that on Wednesday morning we do our committee hearing, then they have all afternoon, they can just like pour over
I agree.
all of the stuff and try to remove things from the consent calendar and all of those kinds of things, and then staff can get ready, and then Thursday we have the board meeting. That way we're not having, we can actually be informed why Laura wanted, because I respect all the board members' opinions, and I completely know there was something that
Yep.
made her uptight about that and why she voted no. So just something maybe the board leadership will look at. And if they do, I will scotch tape them back onto this.
So is that a motion?
Is that a motion to,
I would move that we request board leadership to look at having our committee hearings on Wednesday morning, and then Thursday, the full board meeting. No second?
we don't have to second.
Oh, that's right.
And also, we don't have Robert's rules, that's why I'm letting you just go
Right,
on and
well,
on.
that's actually in our board bylaws.
I know, that's
that
why
You don't
I'm
have
letting
to
you.
be acknowledged during a.
Spencer, let me catch that again. What did you say?
I said, what I said, Joel, was that maybe we should move our committee hearings, our committee meetings to Wednesday morning, and then we end at noon, and then we are prepared for Thursday for the board meeting, so that we don't have this institutional loss in between the 30 intervening days. And I made a motion to ask the executive committee to look into that idea.
So can we have a vote?
I'll second.
He seconded it, even though we don't have to. Can I have a vote? All in favor of this motion?
Aye.
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 Now I'm waiting for another
1, 2, 3,
motion.
4, 5.
I'll
Oh, that's
move
a
we
third.
adjourn.
I second the motion to adjourn. even
Oh,
though I don't-
hold on. I want to pose real quick. Sorry, just a real quick update, if possible, Chair Reeby.
Sure,
So
in
I've
5
been
seconds
talking
or
about-
less.
Okay, about having groups come, and I've talked a lot with Chair Huntsman, and what we've decided is we don't want them just to come and give this laundry list of complaints. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask these groups to choose one issue, and we'll put that on the agenda. So like we'll have the Utah Association of School Business Officers, or UASBO, come and talk about, I don't know, privacy data. Basically one thing that I think the state school board can do unilaterally to improve public education. And I think we've got that down. So next April, we're planning on UASBO, the Utah Association of Public Charter Schools, both coming and bringing us one issue. And then going forward, each month the goal will be to have one group come, UEA, special ed, USBA, and bring one issue they think we can improve unilaterally, and talk about that with us. If we are impressed sufficiently with what they bring to us, we'll make it an agenda item on our next Finance Committee meeting to then take to the full board. So that's kind of the system, talking to staff and Mark and I, that we've come up with. It's still, a work in progress that could get modified. How does that sound to the rest of the board?
Deputy Jones has a statement, and then I have a statement I'd like to make.
Sure, from a staff perspective, that's great. There are deadlines though, so the staff will need to reach out to the representative of UASBO, ask them what the particular item is so that we can load it onto board docs, so that leadership then can review it, like the process of, ensuring that all that's tracked. So we, they need to be made aware of all the different deadlines that even we as internal staff have to put into board docs and all that. That's all. We're supportive as long as the committee is too.
I have a concern about who constitutes who's invited. Is that just by our discretion? Because we might have an organization that we haven't recognized in the past and might ask us to make a statement. And I'd also like to have a time frame put to it so that it's not a free-for-all. I don't know how we can address those questions. So what would constitute who is allowed to talk to us, or who is invited, or, this is something that's just kind of opening up, and it doesn't really have guardrails, to use that term, on it. So I think we should think about that as well.
Chair Reeby, could I respond to that?
Yes.
First, I agree. I think those are both valid points. And if it doesn't work, I think those things might make it too much trouble, more than it's worth. I think the risks of trying it are greater than then, you know, the benefits of trying it are greater than the costs. Maybe
Yeah.
others see differently, I don't know. The one thing is we're going to be quite liberal, you know, on the groups. Really, any group that's actively involved in public education, we're happy. And it'll be kind of at the discretion of finance committee members. If people think it's unfair or don't like it, you know, I'm welcome to that. They're always welcome to come in public comment, you know, and make things. You know, we just think that groups, you know, where that, you know, like a charter school association that has, you know, 50 or more charter schools, you know, that are members, or UASBO or the UEA, you know, could really give us some input. We want them to be thinking, you know, hard about how we can do our jobs better. And if they bring us, you know, away one issue a year, we think because we get so much instruction from the Utah legislature and the federal government, this is what you should do, this is what you should do, this is what you should do. And I think it'd be helpful to listen to the grassroots up. Now, you know, we can always listen. I mean, like Linda Hanson's legendary for visiting, I think, you know, practically every school in her district and certainly every LEA and charter school. And that's great. I mean, you know, carry on. But we're asking these, you know, kind of more organized groups to really put their brains together, talk about it internally, come to us with one issue they think the state school board could unilaterally do better, and hear from them. So they feel like, you know, this is something we can really think about. They're going to listen to us, and we'll listen to it. And if it goes well, you know, we'll put it on the agenda and see. So I agree with the time limit. I would propose 20 minutes. Maybe they get a short time to outline the issue. We get a short time to ask them questions, and then we discuss whether it's worth putting on an agenda item.
Would you like to restrict this to a financial situation, or is it open to any type of situation?
It's the finance committee, so it should be related to the finance committee.
Okay.
And yeah.
Alrighty. Well, thank you, Joel.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else?
The move that we adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for a great meeting. You guys have all been wonderful in scaffolding my first chair experience. I appreciate it tremendously.
Oh, this was your first experience?
Yes, my first chairing experience.
Do you two of you have a minute?
We are officially